In this video, I'll be giving you an in-depth vibe coding tutorial where by the end of it, you'll know how to build large production scale applications simply by using a prompt or using natural human language. Now, while you can do this without any development experience, and this will be a beginner-friendly tutorial, if you are a developer, this will be significantly easier and you will just be able to create something more impressive because you actually understand development and just bluntly, you know how to prompt the model better. If you're a complete beginner, don't worry. What I'm going to aim to teach you here is the best practices, how to use these tools most effectively, and how you can actually create a full application. So something that isn't just a front end, for example, or a nice landing page, but something that has authentication, databases, some security built into it, maybe an AI integration. I'm not sure exactly what the app will look like at this point, but I want to make it advanced and kind of full scale or full stack, right? So we have the front end, back end, databases, etc. So with that said, let's quickly define what vibe coding is, then I'll hop onto the computer and I'll show you the platform we'll be using, and we'll talk about kind of the architecture of a vibe coded app so you understand the different components that we're going to need to build. All right, so first things first, vibe coding. What is it? Well, simply put, this really just means that you're using natural human language to create an application. So rather than dealing with frameworks and languages and writing a ton of code and needing to be a professional developer, you simply tell an AI model what it is that you want. Now, importantly, you need to know what you want, which is something that we're going to talk about more in this video, but it's more like being a product manager, someone kind of leading a team or guiding a bunch of developers and indicating to them what it is that you want built, what you want changed, what features you want added, etc. So there's a lot of ways that this can go wrong, obviously, and if you know the best practices, you can get a significantly better result, which is what I'm going to share with you here. Now, this by no means replaces developers. In fact, most of these vibe-coded apps need developers to maintain them. All of the applications you use that enable vibe coding are built by real developers. You're not vibe coding a vibe coding application, if that makes sense, and there still is a lot of place for that, so I know a lot of people get worried when they see these videos. I wouldn't be. This is just the direction that development is going, and real developers are still very much in demand, as I've seen a lot recently. Okay, with that said, let's talk about the platform we're going to use. Now, for vibe coding, there's a ton of different options out there. There's many different platforms. Now, for this video, I'm going to be using a platform called Emergent. It is free to use. You can get some free credits. It's a relatively new platform. It's only been out a few months now, and in just 2 months, they had over 1 million users sign up for it, and they had over $10 million in annual recurring revenue, which is a massive amount for such a new company. It's also backed by Y Combinator, and they kindly sponsored this video. Don't worry, it is free to use, and a lot of the stuff I'm going to share with you here, you could apply to other platforms as well. It's just the one that I'm going to use here, which I think is new, cool, and that you guys should know about. Anyways, that's the platform. Now, let's hop over to the platform and start vibe coding. All right, so I'm on the Emergent website here. We're going to go ahead and get started, but I do want to talk a little bit about the pricing because I know that's something that's going to come up. Now, this platform, like many of them, are free to use and try out. However, you will have limited credits and you may not have access to all of the advanced features. So in this case, what I've done is I've just purchased the smallest subscription they have, which is $20 per month, which gives you access to some of the more advanced features and some more credits. You do not need to do that if you want to vibe code. Again, you can play around with all kinds of platforms, but what you're going to see, because these are quite expensive to run in terms of the LLM calls, is that mostly you can use them for maybe an hour, hour and a half. You can get something basic built, and then pretty much all of them are going to charge you some money. So I usually recommend, if you really want to learn this, be willing to spend probably 20 bucks, right? 20 bucks a month. That's usually what I'm paying for most of these subscriptions, and that's going to get you quite far. A lot of them have, $200 per month or $1,000 per month subscriptions. You don't need anything like that. 20 bucks is usually totally fine. Okay, so anyways, that's what I have right here. Just in case you see something, on my screen that's not on yours, is because I do have that pro subscription. But again, a lot of what I'll share will apply no matter what. So the first thing you're going to do on Emergent or in any of these platforms probably is just type in an initial prompt. Now, the initial prompt is very important, and this is how we're going to kind of set the context of our project and tell the model what it is that we want to build. So I've just opened a web page here, which I'll link in the description, which is a kind of detailed guide on how to actually prompt the model and how to create an initial prompt. Now, general best practices are that whenever you're prompting these models, you need to be very clear on what it is that you actually want, right? You need to be specific, you need to give all of the details, and you need to say more so what you want rather than what you don't want. A lot of people say, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. That's not really the best way to go about it. It's more so telling it directly what you do want it to do. So see here, define clear business or personal goals. So also, rather than just telling it what you want, tell it why you want that and what the objective of this application is so that it can build that context in. So it shows you an example of an initial prompt here, right? Here's the business goal. Here's some features that we need. Here's the target users. Here's some success criteria. Okay. What I usually do whenever I'm prompting these models is I go into like a voice mode or a dictation. I dump it to like ChatGPT. I just talk for like 2 or 3 minutes on my idea as if I was sharing it with a friend, for example. And I tell it, craft an effective prompt based on these guidelines. And I would just copy the guidelines directly from this site to something like ChatGPT that I can pass to an AI model to create an application. So I'm never writing the prompt completely from scratch. I'm usually just kind of dictating my thoughts into an AI model and telling it, give me an effective prompt based on that. And it does the organization and kind of, applies the best practices. For example, be explicit and specific, provide the context, use positive framing and quality modifiers, for example. So rather than create a dashboard, create a comprehensive dashboard, right? And then after that, in this specific tool, the agent will start creating a more in-depth plan. That's something that happens in a lot of these, vibe coding tools. So I actually already created a really in-depth prompt here. I just have it in Google Docs. Again, I thought through the application that I wanted to build quite in depth, and I'm just going to copy this whole prompt. I'll go over some components of it with you in a second and paste it into Emergent. So let's just go ahead and paste this for right now and get it started. And then while it's working, I can explain to you some of the things that I did and what I'm trying to build. It's very important that you know what you want to build before you start here, because if you don't, you're going to get all kinds of wild results and the model is not really going to know what to do. It's going to bring you in a lot of weird directions. So I'm going to press run here, but quickly I'll let you know that you can change the agent type that you want to use here to E1 or E1.1. If you want it to be fast, then change it to E1.1. If you want it to be more stable, which I want, I'm going to go with E1. And if you want to make mobile apps, which this platform can do in React Native, you can use the mobile agent, but we don't need mobile for this particular application. Then we're going to go and change the model if we want. So I'm just going to use Claude 4 Sonnet. We could change GPT-5 or use the extended thinking model or reasoning model from Claude 4.0. But as you can see, that's going to be 2 times more expensive. It's not really needed right now, so I'm not going to use it. A few other features here, like adding MCP servers and stuff and changing the templates and the budget for the application. You can also change the, if you want this to be private, public, etc. So I'm going to close that. I'm just going to go ahead and press on run, and this is going to get going for me. Okay, so while it does that, let me quickly talk about the application that I want to build and some of the components of the prompt that I put together. So some of you may know, I run a mentorship program called DevLaunch. Now, for this application, I figured let me build something that I actually know, what I want to build, that I have a lot of experience with, something that would actually solve a problem for me. And that is kind of a dedicated platform for all of our DevLaunch students so they can view, for example, their roadmap, or they could see the calls that are coming up. They can see all of the courses that we have, something where there's, a lot of different components to it. And there's actually authentication, and there's users, and there's roles, and we have coaches, and we have admins, and we need to be able to create data and save data and, store specific data for particular users. We need to be able to onboard people and have them, fill in a form, book calls with us, all of that kind of stuff. So I'm not going to go over everything, but essentially that's what I'm asking this to do. I give it the context, like this is the program, this is what I want you to do, right? Kind of my motivation. And then I go through and I have different features. We need authentication and roles. We need user management. We need group calls. We need courses and lessons. We need an onboarding flow. And then I'm going to add an AI matchmaking component where anytime someone joins, it will automatically try to match them to another student that's similar to their experience so they can connect, collaborate, and kind of, build a community. Anyways, that's kind of what I'm attempting to build here. And that would solve a big problem for us at DevLaunch because right now we have all kinds of software that we're using. And while it's fine, it can be a little bit hard to organize and get people onboarded to that. So this would be better. So hopefully you got some context there. I went back to Emergent now, and we can see the agent is asking me some questions. It says, before I start, can you answer these? For the AI matchmaking, what do you want to use? So in my case, I'm going to use the Emergent LLM key. Now, the way this works in Emergent is that it has a universal LLM key for all of the popular kind of AI models like Anthropic, OpenAI, etc., Gemini, as you can see here. So rather than having to provide your own key, you can just use the universal key, which makes the integration very easy. So I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, let's do that. Now, I also had the ability, for users to like reset their password or something. So it's asking me what should we use for the email service. So I'm just going to tell it to use SendGrid, which is one of the options there. And by the way, if you didn't understand the question, you could just ask the agent, hey, can you, clarify this? Can you tell me what you mean? I don't know what SendGrid is. What do you suggest, etc. For authentication, how should the first admin account be created? I'm going to say create it for me. Use, Tim at techwithtim.net and admin123 as password. Okay, and then for the cal.com integration, do you have a embed code ready? Should I create a placeholder? Use a placeholder for now, because I told it, hey, we're gonna have to have like some bookings, for one-on-one meetings and stuff, and we're gonna use cal.com. Okay, so I'm gonna answer all of those, press enter, and then it should go ahead and start working. I will warn you, this can take a long time, can take 15, 20 minutes sometimes, depends on how much you're asking it to do. And usually the first prompt takes the longest, and then the ones after that are gonna be a little bit more iterative. Now, while this is building, I do want to explain to you a few things about kind of the architecture of the type of apps that you're likely going to build. Now, when we build an app and we build a mobile app or a web app or something like that, you have kind of three main components you should be aware of. The first is the front end, then you have the back end, then you have the database. Now, the front end is kind of what you're seeing right now. It's the user interface. It's the thing a user is going to look at. It's where data is presented. It's where someone maybe signs in, for example, where they make a post, right? It's the thing we're all familiar with. Now, the front end is typically pretty simple to build, and that's why you see a lot of other popular AI tools that just generate front ends for you, right? Or make really nice landing pages. Now, here, we're trying to make something a little bit more complex. We're going to have user data, we're going to have roles, we're going to have permissions, we're going to have kind of this like content management system where we're creating calls. And in order to do that, you need to have a backend. Now, the backend is where secure operations for your application can take place. For example, authenticating a user and making sure this user is who they say they are, checking their username and password, right? Associating different data with different users, having roles like I'm an admin and then other people are students, for example. That's really what the backend is responsible for, the heavy logic and anything secure for your application. Anything that you wouldn't want any random user to be able to see, well, you need to kind of gate that by creating a backend, right? And that mostly has to deal with authentication and authorization, which Emergent can handle for us. Then we have the database, pretty straightforward, but that's where we store all of the data. That's usually connected to the backend. And the flow is that we have a front end, user does something, that sends a request to our backend. Backend makes sure the user can actually do that thing, and then it does the thing, essentially pulls some data, returns some result to the front end, okay? So just understand front end, back end, database, and the reason why this platform kind of stands out to me and why I'm using it for this tutorial is that it can handle all of that. So it can create a full stack application, not just a front end, and something that is actually quite complex, which is what I want to show you how to do. So it's been a few minutes now and the agent has just completed. And what I'm going to do now is take a preview of the application and see if it's working. Now, that's usually the way that I would do things, right? Ask it for something, check to make sure it actually did the thing you asked for. If it didn't, revise it or tell it to fix it and go on from there. Now, the way that Emergent works, which is a little bit different from some of the other tools, is that it actually automatically tests things for you. So it has multiple agents that are running in the background. One of those agents is an automated testing agent where it's going to make sure that everything you asked it to do is working properly. For example, during this build, there was an error with one of the files. It detected that error. It automatically fixed it. And you can see if you look through kind of all of the logs that are appearing here, it says, I noticed the login screen isn't working. Okay, let's try to fix that. Okay, perfect. The test results are showing the application is working, right? Because it has that agent that's doing the testing for you in the background. But of course, if you run into a bug, well, then you can, just tell it to fix it, or you can even dive in there and fix it manually. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to refresh here the app preview window. You can see it says, welcome to DevLaunch, sign in to access your mentorship program. It told me that this was the account that it created, and that's what I asked for as well, admin123. So let's go ahead and sign up. Okay, cool. So it brings us into the admin panel here. Keep in mind, this is all from a single prompt. There's a few buttons that aren't working, like view schedule, find my study partner. If I go to this, looks like that page doesn't work or it crashes maybe. If we go to group calls, again, the redirect doesn't seem to be working properly. So that's a bug that obviously we'll need to fix, right? And then we have search. That also doesn't seem to really work properly, but generally it looks like the application is kind of functioning, but there are definitely some bugs. So let me share that now with the agent, tell it, hey, these things aren't working, let's fix it. And this is, by the way, a huge part of vibe coding, right? You're gonna ask for something, it's gonna mess something up. There's gonna be a mistake, there's gonna be a bug. Now these tools are getting better and better, but really this is a test of patience to see, okay, are you actually able to sit there and go through all of these problems and fix them, which now is significantly easier with the AI models, whereas before as a developer, you'd have to rack your brain and fix them manually yourself. Anyways, I'm going to just kind of write a prompt here, tell it what's going wrong, see if it can fix that, and then we'll go from there and we'll talk about some more features. Okay, so I've just written the prompt here. Again, I just told it I can't really interact with anything on the site. Let's go ahead and press enter and let's see if it can fix that. All right, so it looks like it just fixed this. It told me, hey, I did this stuff. Can you make sure that this is working now? So let's refresh the live preview here. And let's see if we can navigate, and perfect, there we go. Okay, so now I can navigate to the different areas. I don't know if all this stuff is gonna work right now. Okay, so these buttons still aren't working. Okay, completed onboarding, join dev launch, user management. Doesn't look like I can click into the users, but overall, a lot of the functionality is here. Okay, add user. Let's try Tim at gmail.com, Tim R. Okay, create. All right, looks like that was created. Okay, cool. User created, invitation email has been sent. I'm not able to test that because that's not a valid email, but that is a good start. All right, so this is pretty good for a start. Now I'm just gonna tell it, yes, all of this is good. But before I do that, I'm gonna save this to GitHub. So if you've never used version control before, there's this tool called Git and GitHub. GitHub is kind of like the online version where you can create what's called a repository, which stores all of the code that's been written. Now behind the scenes here, Emergent has wrote a ton of code. And what we want to do is make sure that we save that code so that if we need to go in and manually fix it later on, or if there's a bug that pops up later, we can get back to a previous version. Now, built into the Emergent platform, you can actually roll back. So you see there's this little thing that says roll back here. You can press this button and it will bring you back to the previous state and change all of the code to be at that position. However, Git and GitHub is more universal. It means we can also, for example, take this code and use it on our own computer if we wanted to. So what I'm going to do is just press this button that says save to GitHub, and I'm going to connect my GitHub account to this. Don't worry, GitHub is completely free. Just make an account on GitHub and then connect it. And if you're using any type of vibe coding tool, I highly recommend that you use this immediately. And if you don't have some kind of GitHub, integration built in, then tell the agent, hey, I want you to make a Git repo. I want you to explain to me how to upload this to GitHub and ask it explicitly how to use Git. I'm not going to go over all of the commands and everything for Git, but generally you always want to be using this, especially in a larger project, because if there is a nightmare situation, you'll be able to look up like how to get back to the previous state, assuming that all of this was tracked on GitHub. Okay, so let's go ahead and connect to GitHub and let's go through this. I just need to authorize this for my, kind of organization. I'm going to install and authorize, and then obviously I got to put in the code, so let's do that. All right, so I just connected it here. Now I will do this in 1 second, but for now I'm just going to press save to GitHub, and it's going to ask me for a repo. What I'm going to do is go and press on create new, and for the repo I'm going to enter a name. So I'm going to call this dev launch, and we'll call student app or something like that. And for the branch, just leave this as main, and then I'm going to go create and push that to GitHub. All right, so it looks like that was successful. I'm just going to press view on GitHub and just open this up. And you can see now that we have all of the different code that was written, right? We have the back end, we have the front end, right? All of the different components, SRC, etc., all of this kind of stuff. And we are kind of good to go there from the GitHub side. So again, you could then take this to your own computer. You could bring it into another tool. That's why we definitely want to be using GitHub. All right, so let's go, okay, got it. I'm gonna tell this it is all good. And then we're gonna continue and get it to continue building the rest of the features of our application and make this complete. Okay, so it's now waiting for my reply. Again, it's pretty much saying, okay, I've done all of these kinds of things. This is the status of the application, but we know that there's more that we want for this app and things obviously aren't quite working yet, or we don't have everything 100%. So I'm just gonna tell the agent that. Before we do that though, I'll quickly go over a few features you should be aware of. So first of all, you'll notice that now I'm kind of in this new view because I closed the live preview. So if you close that here, right? And you can see now that we have this code editor view. So if I click on code, this is going to allow me to actually open up a VS Code kind of code environment in my browser here, where I could make changes directly to my code base, and those will be automatically synced here with Emergent. So it says, okay, this is the password. I did not save the password that I should have saved. So let's go code and copy the password and go back here and paste that and submit. And that should bring us into this coding environment. Now, I'm not going to write any code, but I just want to show you that this does exist, because if you are a developer or you want to change a color or an image or something like that, then you can do it from here, and you have a live coding environment directly in your browser where you can view all of the files. For example, we go src, we go components, right? We can see we have a ton of different components that were created, like label, menu bar, popover, all of this kind of stuff, right? Same thing if we go to the back end, you'll notice that this isn't using like Supabase or some other, kind of plugged in backend. It's actually a custom backend here written in Python. Now this file is quite long, so we probably would want to make this a little bit cleaner, but you can see all of the stuff that's actually happening, especially if that means something to you. Okay, so that's the coding component. I would say generally if you're vibe coding and you don't know how to develop, probably don't dive into the code too much. You can read it, you can search for things, you can change small values, but generally trying to make large changes is probably going to cost you more than it's worth if you don't know how to code. If you do already know how to code, of course, you know what you can and cannot do there. Okay, so agent is waiting. Let's give this another prompt now and kind of tell it to keep going with the rest of our features. So I'm starting small here, and I've just given it a prompt telling it, hey, what I want to do is I want to work on the course module feature right now. Rather than telling it like build everything and having it work on 20 different things at once, which these agents are capable of doing, I want to go one feature at a time. That way I can build a feature, I can test it. Once it works, we can move on to the next one. And then I have really nice checkpoints where if I do need to roll back, or I do need to, for example, go back to a previous version, I didn't build this massive amount of code, break everything, and then really reset my progress drastically. So I'm going to go ahead and press enter. We're going to build that component, then we'll move on to the next ones, and we'll keep building out this app until it's complete. All right, so it just finished. It's telling me now that it has completed this kind of course management system. So let's open up the preview and let's test it out and see if this is working. Okay, let's go courses and cool. Okay, so we have complete test course. If we press on start learning, we can get into the modules, which is what I was looking for. We can press watch and then we can watch a video. I just told it, give me the video on YouTube. So that's why it's linking to like a random YouTube video for right now. Says the duration, has a description, and that's pretty much what I was looking for in terms of the courses. Now we could have some images and thumbnails and stuff, but I think for now that's okay. And then I want to test if this works. So I'm going to say add module, new module. Okay, testing. And the order, I don't really like that, but again, it's okay for right now. Okay, module 2, add a submodule, intro, create, add a lesson, lesson 2, okay. And actually that's not going to work. HTTPS youtube.com, duration 10, create lesson, and it looks like that is working. Okay, cool. So I can see that it's functioning here. We can go into the various courses here. We can see all of the lessons and whatnot. And now what I want to move on to is the group calls. So effectively, let's do the same thing for group calls. Then we can do the AI component. We can just keep building feature by feature. And notice, again, because we kind of took this small feature, it takes less time, obviously, for this to run. We can test it really easily, and it's a lot more clear what the app actually needs to do or what the AI needs to do, rather than asking it to build a massive thing at once, which oftentimes is going to lead you to a lot of bugs and a lot of mistakes. Okay, so I just gave it a long prompt here on effectively saying, hey, do the group call feature now. I gave it a bunch of information on what it needs to do for that. And we're going to go ahead and press on enter, and now we'll simply wait for that to finish. All right, so this one just finished here. Again, a few minutes. It said, okay, essentially it built the thing that I asked it to build, but tells me that while it automatically tested itself and it looks promising, I should test it manually, which you should always do. Again, a lot of these tools don't have the built-in testing. In this case, there's an agent in the background testing for you. So let's go to group calls. Okay, and we can see we have a few calls. Looks like I can edit. Okay, very cool. I didn't even ask it for that, but it doesn't look like I can delete. Oh, that's because it was ended. Let's see. Yeah, there's no way to delete, so I'll quickly ask it to add that. However, looks like join call. Yeah, it just redirects me to Zoom, which is fine. And then can I make a new call? Let's test this. Let's call, dev with Tim or something. Select a host. Okay, I'm the only admin, so that's me. Description will be a group call. Okay, let's go date time. Just make it like this, maybe. Meeting link. Okay. Zoom.com, and then schedule. Okay, cool. And then we have Dev with Tim showing up here in one day. Nice. So I think the only thing I need is the ability to delete the calls. Let me ask for that. And then while we do that, I will add another feature as well. All right, so I just went through the flow of actually getting it to add the delete features. You can see now that I'm able to delete stuff. Same thing in the courses, like there's a delete icon now, which I asked it for. And then I told it, hey, I want to test the onboarding flow now because I don't know what it looks like to be a normal user. I just know what it looks like to be an admin. So can you create like a new normal user account for me so that I can sign in with that user and test it? That's kind of what I asked it in like a less verbose, wording. So let's see if it creates that new account for me, and then I can sign in, test that, and see if it's working. And again, the cool thing here is that this is a native built-in backend. So rather than using Supabase or having to deploy this to even test it out or run the stuff yourself, it's just automatically running inside of a machine by default. It's handling all of the creation. You can see that beep that you guys probably just heard means that it's completed. And now it's telling me, okay, sign in with this, with test pass 123. So let's sign out. Okay, and let's go test pass 123. Sign in, and did I spell that right? Test pass. Let's see, 123, test user at devlaunch.com, and it says login failed. Okay, well, that's a good bug to find. Let's tell it that that failed. Okay, so it's fixed that now. I was able to sign in. It says enter your full name, so let's go Timothy Rusika, profile photo. Okay, we don't need one right now. Tell us about yourself. What is your current programming experience? Advanced. What technologies are you most interested in learning? Okay, looks like there's no box for that. So again, we could fix that. What are your main learning goals? I want to get better at interviewing. How many hours per week can you dedicate to learning? Let's go to 30 plus and go next. Okay, almost done. Book your strategy call. And then this is where the calendar integration would be. I don't want to expose that link right now because obviously that's for my students, but this looks cool. And then I can go complete onboarding, and okay, another quick bug. So it says onboarding completed, but then it brings us back to this page. So let me tell it about that and essentially describe what happened, and then it should fix it. Now again, what's happening right now is going to happen, right? When you build a large application, you're going to have bugs. You're going to need to test it. Just make sure you're going slowly, and then explain really clearly how to reproduce the bug and what the error was. This is going to help the AI solve it. So don't just say something's wrong. Tell it exactly what is wrong. What did you do to get to that result? What was the expected outcome, and what happened instead? This is kind of a standard like bug reporting framework. But what we're going to do is share how do we reproduce it, what was the error, and what were we expecting to happen. All right, so describe the error here just so you know what I would have said here, right? After I completed the last onboarding step, it redirected me back to the beginning of the onboarding where it said complete your profile. I was on step 3. I pressed continue. It said onboarding completed successfully. We saw the little message pop up, right? But then it didn't redirect me to the correct page. It brought me to the beginning of the onboarding. So that's pretty clear in terms of what happened, what the error was. That'll help the AI get to the problem faster. So let's go ahead and press enter and see if it fixes that for us. All right, so it says it's fixed here. So let's go back, same thing, and let's test this. Although I guess I'm gonna need to refresh. And let's see, and there we go. Okay, so it brings me to the correct page because now the onboarding is completed, and looks like I don't have the ability to delete because I'm not an admin. I can see the dashboard, I can see the group calls, same thing, I can't edit them. Okay, perfect, so that's fine and good. That's working good, sorry. And then if I go to find my study partner, it says no matches found. It says complete your onboarding, check back later for study partners. Okay, so I think that's the next feature that I want to work on. So let me tell the AI to start building that. That is now working. However, the find your study partner feature is not working. Can you create some fake data in the database so that the find your study partner feature will work with the AI LLM integration? And by the way, when I press on find my match, it says that my onboarding isn't completed, even though I'm inside of the student dashboard. Let's make sure that all of the data is correct here and that this feature is working. Okay, so I told it, fix the AI matchmaking feature. I just ran it right now and you can see that it's working. It says, both have advanced experience levels, found the match percentage, then gave me a few results. This connect button isn't doing anything right now because I didn't specify what I want that to do, but it just shows a few students that you could reach out to, and then has kind of some boilerplate, fake images here, etc. Cool. Okay, so that is working. I would say overall, most of the features that I want are built. Again, some of these things like the navigation isn't correct, which we could fix later on, but I'm not going to drag you through that in the video. Also, this doesn't make a ton of sense in terms of collapsing the nav bar, but generally speaking, most of it is built. So what I want to do at this point is go over a few more advanced features that you want to be aware of for these types of tools. Now, the first is this fork mode. Okay, so let's explain kind of what this does. Every time that you use this LLM, right, you use this AI tool, it's preserving all of the context that you had previously. So for example, we have this really long conversation chain right now, right? And there's all these different things that we've said, and the AI is tracking all of that, and it keeps essentially building longer and longer prompts with more and more context, which are more expensive and end up costing more credits. So what we can do is we can fork the current session that we're on, and what that's going to do is take all of the context, actually turn it into a really smart summary that's significantly smaller and less tokens, which means we'll end up using less credits, and then pass that to a new session so that we don't have all of this information that we probably don't need. So when you're working on larger sessions, this becomes more important, and what we can do is preserve the context, right? Refresh the memory, and then spend less. So especially if we just want to start from a clean slate, we just want to do something that's kind of a separate, like independent task, but we still want the previous history, then we fork this. So I'm going to go to fork. It's going to generate the summary of all of the messages that we had here. Then it's going to take that summary, pass that to kind of our new session, and we'll start fresh from there, and we can continue working on this, adding new features, etc. All right, so just made this summary for us. Obviously, we can read through it if we want in terms of product requirements, key technical concepts, code architecture, all of the stuff that it has done. A lot of this will not be extremely relevant to you, but you can see that it's done that. If we wanted to, we could edit it. In my case, I'm going to approve and continue. And then what I'm going to do is fork the current agent as well. So I'm just going to use the default agent. Now we could change the model that we want to use. And there also is some more advanced features here to create your own agents that are running in dedicated VMs, but I'm not going to dive into that because it's not super relevant to this type of video. So anyways, I've forked the new session. It's going to do this. Once that is done, I'll be back and we'll continue. Okay, cool. So it's brought us this new session here. You can also see if we click through here that now we have a new window up top because we forked over this session. We can continue working in this one. We can also work in the fork session, obviously, which is going to be cheaper now. And then we can preview the application, look at the code, all of that kind of stuff. I'm not going to keep building anything else, but I will show you a few more things that you should be aware of. So let's say that we're finished with this now, right? All is done. What we can do is we can deploy this. Now we can literally just press the deployment button. When we do that, it's going to actually host the application, not in a preview environment, but in a production environment that people could start using. Now you can see it costs 50 credits per month. So decide obviously if you want to do that or not. And then if you want, you can just save the current app to GitHub, right? And you can go deploy it yourself. Now that's going to be a little bit complex unless you know how to code. So probably a lot easier and honestly even cost effective just to deploy it in this. But if you wanted to deploy it on, your own server or something, you can do that because if we go back to GitHub, right? Let's refresh. You'll see that we have all of the commits and all of the history of like everything that we've done here in GitHub. So I'm going to go ahead and press on deploy now. It says it'll take 5 to 7 minutes. So we'll wait for that deployment to finish and then we'll check out the completed app. So a few minutes later and the app is now deployed. We can visit the site. Also, let's go back. We also could have connected our own domain. I'm not going to do that at this point, but you can. And you can see it brings us to our live page. Now let me try to sign in. Okay, and I successfully signed in and you can see that I can go through and everything that we saw before is functioning here. I can edit a call. I can, delete something. You get the idea. Okay, so the deployment is finished, and that's pretty much everything that I wanted to go over. Now, in terms of how many credits this cost us, you can see per kind of, chat or session. So in this session, which is relatively small, it just cost us 2.28 credits. The way you saw that is if you close the tab here, so you press the X button, you can press on this little info button, and on the info button, it shows you the credit spend, the machine type, the model, job ID, all of that kind of stuff, and also the most recent export to GitHub. And then if we go back to the other one here and we open this up, you can see that cost us about 55 credits. That was a lot, obviously, because it did a ton of stuff. And then same thing, you can scroll through here and see everything else. So just something worth noting, you can check the credits there. Now, last few things to mention here, if we go back to home, there are a few other features that you can use here. For example, we can go to MCP. We can add our own custom MCP servers here, like Supabase or Notion or something along those lines, or our own custom MCP. We also can change the template, as I mentioned before, change the budget, etc. So if I go here and I go to new workspace, if I want, I can create a shared workspace with multiple other people so they can collaborate with me and we can work on the same project. Again, I don't have a team right now, so I'm not going to do that, but something worth noting. Okay, so that mostly covers everything that I wanted to go over here. Now, I know these videos are a little bit all over the place. That's just kind of the nature of vibe coding. It's unpredictable. I didn't script this. I wasn't sure exactly what was going to happen in this video. But generally, what being successful with these tools comes down to is how well do you plan? So how well do you actually know what you want and how kind of deeply have you thought through that? how do you craft your prompts and instruct the model? And then really just how persistent are you and how often are you willing to deal with bugs, errors, and fix those and get through it? Programming and vibe coding is ultimately just problem solving. These models obviously do a lot of it for us, but the better we are at problem solving and more importantly, kind of breaking down our thought process and planning out what we want to do into small logical tasks, the more successful you're going to be here. Anyways, guys, that's going to wrap up this video. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.